When I rolled my first coffee cart onto the sidewalk, my mom burst out laughing, and my dad coldly asked, "This is what you call a career?" They used to be proud when I worked in an office, wearing a white shirt with coffee, ready every morning. But what they didn't know was that it was that brown liquid, the thing they considered a child's game, that saved me from a soul-crushing existence. And when my coffee cart chain spread across the city, they started to admit he inherited our perseverance. My name is Daniel, 28 years old. I was born in a middle-class family in a small town in the Midwest where everything had an unwritten rule: go to college, graduate, find a stable job, and then get married. Everyone in town knew my parents, the Macmillans, as the role models of the golden generation, hardworking, frugal, and practical. My dad was a retired accountant, having managed the books for a construction company for over 35 years. My mom had been a secretary at the local high school. They were the type of people who never deviated from the norm. They taught me that safety is success, and I lived by that for most of my youth. After college, I worked in marketing for a real estate firm about 40 minutes away from home. The pay was just enough to get by. Every morning, I'd take the bus, grab a plastic cup of coffee, smile at my colleagues, and tell myself, at least I have a job. But with each passing day, I felt more like the old photocopy machine in the corner of the office, always running, but never noticed. I didn't hate my job, but I didn't love it either. Everything just felt bland. Then one day, while I was walking down a street corner, I saw an older man, gray hair, wearing an apron, brewing coffee on a small cart. There was no cafe, no flashy neon sign, just a smile, a few ceramic cups, and the rich aroma of freshly roasted beans. I stopped and bought a cup. Strangely, after just one sip, I felt more awake than 100 boring meetings combined. Not just from the coffee, but from the look in his eyes, the eyes of someone who was truly living with passion. I started coming back there every morning, and we began talking. His name was Luis, a former mechanical engineer who had quit his job at 50 to sell coffee. "Don't wait until you're old to start living for yourself," he told me. "Time doesn't wait for anyone." That line haunted me. I began to seriously think about what I truly wanted. And oddly enough, the thing that excited me every day was coffee. The feeling of serving someone something that would make them smile in the morning. I remembered my childhood, how I was obsessed with making coffee for my dad with the old noisy machine. I once wanted to open a small shop, just to read books and serve simple drinks. But then I grew up, and all those dreams were dismissed as impractical. After weeks of struggling with myself, I quit my job. When I told my parents, I thought they'd be disappointed. But I didn't expect them to react so strongly. My dad stood up from the table, slammed his hand on the wood as if he were interrogating a criminal. "You're quitting your stable job to sell coffee on the street." My mom cried, not because I was losing my job, but because she thought I was ruining my future. I understood their concern. I was scared too, but there was something inside me, an urge I had never felt before, that pushed me forward. I didn't want to wait another 10 or 20 years only to regret not trying. With some savings, I bought an old cart from Luis at a cheap price. He even gave me a few special recipes. I learned how to roast beans, make almond milk by hand, and began every day at 4 a.m. to prepare. I chose the very street corner where I first tasted that life-changing coffee. No flashy signs, just a wooden board with the words, "Wake up real." On my first day, I sold 7 cups. And no, my parents didn't come, but I knew that I had just stepped out of the mold they had built for me. I had chosen to live. On the first day, I opened my small coffee stand. Everything seemed promising. Selling 7 cups was an achievement, especially since I had just started, and no one even knew who I was. But just as I began to see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, the darkness came crashing back. My first major problem was the lack of customers. No matter how hard I tried to invite people, most of them passed by without giving my little coffee stand a second glance. They were used to the big chains with bright windows and well-designed logos. My stand had only a few old plastic chairs, a small table, and a handmade sign with the simple name, "Wake Up Real." I remembered the advice from my parents. Business needs a clear plan. You can't just follow your instincts. You can't rely on things that aren't sustainable. Those words echoed in my head every time I stood alone behind the counter waiting for customers. By the third day, the pressure started to mount. My savings were running out, and there were still no signs of breakthrough. Every morning, I woke up early, prepared the coffee, and sat watching people rush by without stopping. I even began to hear gossip. Some people in town didn't understand what I was doing and called me a failure or just a crazy young man trying to escape reality. One day, the owner of the nearby grocery store looked at me and sneered, "Your coffee's so expensive. Who's going to buy it? No one's coming to help you. Stop dreaming." That comment hit me like a slap in the face, making me feel that everything I was doing was pointless. The feeling of failure came quickly, but as time passed, I realized something. If I stopped now, it would all be over. I couldn't go back to my old life sitting in a company I never belonged to. I couldn't live under the control of those who said I needed a stable and safe job. Then one rainy morning, as I hurriedly prepared coffee, a woman walked up to my stand. She was wearing a black raincoat and seemed to be in a rush. When she got closer, I recognized her as Sarah, an old high school friend. She looked at me for a moment before suddenly saying, "I can't believe you're doing this." She laughed mockingly, but I couldn't help noticing the curious look in her eyes. She didn't come to buy coffee. "You know," she said, "people are saying you quit your stable job to do something no one needs. Aren't you afraid of failing?" Her words made me feel suffocated, but I kept my composure. I don't care what people say anymore. This is what I want to do. But inside, I couldn't deny that I was starting to feel scared. This town was small, and I was just a new face. Could I really succeed? Everything around me seemed to be falling apart, and in those moments, I heard mocking laughter and sneers about my street-side coffee shop. I couldn't help but wonder if I was living in an illusion. On late nights, when I sat alone in the pushcart, the dim lights flickering, I asked myself, is this the right decision? Can I overcome all these obstacles? Maybe I was wrong to think I could change my life with just a simple cup of coffee. But one thing I was sure of, no matter what, I couldn't stop. The following days were certainly not easy. The patience I had invested seemed to be turning into nothing. Every day, I watched my coffee stand remain empty. I opened at 6 a.m., prepared each cup of coffee with care, but customers were nowhere to be found. Despite running promotions and even posting eye-catching pictures on Instagram, I couldn't attract any attention. As days went by, I began to realize that the problem wasn't just that I needed to advertise more. It was that I was trying to convince people who didn't care. They only saw a tiny coffee stand with no name recognition, no backing from any famous brand. I knew I needed to change, but I didn't know where to start. Then, one day, an unexpected event occurred. I got a call from a man named Mark Kark, was an old college friend. He called to inform me that my bank account had been frozen. I couldn't believe it. But when I checked, I realized that my account had been frozen due to tax debt. Panicked, unsure of what to do. Was everything over? Had I been too hasty in quitting my stable job to chase an unrealistic dream? I tried calling lawyers and agencies, but no one seemed to be able to resolve the issue immediately. At that moment, I felt like I was standing on the edge. Everything I had worked for seemed to be collapsing. I couldn't afford to pay my employees, couldn't restock supplies, and my coffee stand seemed to be dying a slow death. In my desperation, I received a call from Sarah, the old friend I had seen earlier. At first, I didn't think I wanted to talk to her, but she insisted on meeting me. I didn't want to hear any more criticism, but I decided to agree to meet. Though I was filled with anxiety, when she walked into the stand, her expression was different from before. Instead of mocking, she looked at me with deep sympathy. She sat down, looked at me for a while, and then gently said, "Do you know, no matter what I say, I can see that what you're doing is right. Maybe you can't see it now, but don't give up." I looked at her in surprise. She had never been the type to encourage me before, so why was she like this today? She continued, "I know you're struggling, but you can start over. I can help you. This coffee stand isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Her sincerity moved me. The truth was, I didn't know what to do next, and her words were like a glimmer of light in the midst of a dark storm. Sarah helped me reconnect with some investors who were willing to believe in my dream. She also helped me restructure my financial plan, finding ways to save costs while still ensuring the quality of service. Gradually, I began to feel a glimmer of hope, however. Not everyone supported this change. A few weeks later, as I was starting to recover, I received a message from my parents. They demanded I come home immediately. "You can't keep living like this. You'll fail soon," my dad said over the phone. Once again, their words hurt. My parents had never truly trusted my decision. They always thought a stable job was the right choice. I couldn't keep enduring this. But at the same time, I didn't want to disappoint them. But this time, I didn't allow myself to be defeated. I decided to stand firm against their criticism and continue on my path. I understood that if I wanted to succeed, I had to believe in myself and not let other people's words hold me back. No matter how difficult it got, I had to hold on to my belief in this dream. A month passed, and my coffee shop gradually found its rhythm. With Sarah's support and the investors backing me, I started to see results. But one morning, just as I was preparing to open for business, I received an unexpected phone call. On the other end of the line was a representative from the bank. She informed me that I had cleared my tax debt and my account had been reinstated. But the story didn't end there. She went on to share even more significant news. A major investor had expressed interest in my coffee shop and wanted to buy a stake to help expand the brand. When I heard this, I could barely believe it. Everything I had gone through, all the hardship, the sleepless nights trying to keep the shop running was now paying off in ways I never imagined. I was beginning to see light at the end of the dark tunnel. But things weren't over yet. Just as I was beginning to celebrate, an email unexpectedly appeared in my inbox. It was a letter from my parents. In the letter, not only did they apologize for what they had said before, but they also offered financial support and asked for forgiveness, hoping for a chance to be involved in my project. They even promised to help manage the coffee shop if I agreed to accept their help. At that moment, I was torn between sympathy and anger. My mother, who had always protected me throughout my childhood, now wanted to intrude on the dream I had struggled so hard to build. Their offer truly confused me. Was I wrong to give up my stable job? Or did they not understand that I didn't want to start over under their supervision? A storm of anger rose within me. How could they think I would forget everything they said in the past? Their so-called good advice, their disappointed looks, the criticisms I had to endure for years. How could I trust the people who had never trusted me from the start? I decided not to reply immediately and instead took a few days to think it over. As time passed, I realized that I didn't need their help to succeed. I had built everything from scratch, and now I no longer wanted to share my success with the people who had once seen me as a failure. Finally, I decided to respond with a letter. In it, I wrote that I knew my parents meant well, but I was no longer the child they could easily control. This coffee shop was my dream, and I would continue to run it on my own. I thanked them for their help in the past, but now I would walk this path alone. Soon after I received a reply from them, my mother wrote a short letter, full of sorrow. You were right. We were wrong not to believe in you. We apologize and wish you all the best. You will always be our pride. These words brought tears to my eyes. I never imagined my parents would change so quickly, but I also didn't feel angry anymore. They hadn't understood me in the past, but now they saw my efforts. Life went on, and even though the road was still filled with challenges, I no longer felt alone. My coffee shop continued to thrive, and I decided to open another branch in a different city. My efforts had paid off, and the success I achieved didn't just come from perseverance, but also from not allowing myself to give up in the face of failure. As time passed, my coffee shop continued to thrive. I began receiving support not only from customers, but also from friends and business partners who had believed in me from the start. The tough days, the moments when I felt like I was about to give up, were now nothing more than distant memories, like a passing breeze. I had learned how to stand strong and face challenges without relying on anyone but myself. Through constant effort, I was able to expand the business, hire more employees, and create a friendly work environment where everyone could grow. Most importantly, I had built a loyal team of employees who always supported me during the tough phases of the shop's journey. That day, as I looked at the tables full of customers in my shop, I realized I had achieved things I had never dared to dream of. In a special moment, I suddenly thought back to those difficult days when I stood alone in a small room with big dreams, unsure if I could make them a reality. But now, those dreams had come true, not thanks to anyone else's help, but because of my own determination and perseverance. Once everything was running smoothly, I decided to meet with my parents. I didn't approach them with resentment or criticism. I had come to understand that even though they hadn't understood me from the beginning, they had eventually learned to accept the path I had chosen. I invited them to the coffee shop, not to ask for forgiveness, but to thank them for their doubts. And the initial criticism had pushed me to do better, to be stronger. When my mother stepped into the shop, her eyes sparkled with surprise. She saw what I had achieved, and I knew she felt proud. "You did it," she said, her voice full of emotion. And I simply responded with a smile, knowing I had made the right choice. This story isn't just about business success. It's about resilience and courage in life. I've learned that sometimes criticism, hardships, and failures can be the strongest motivation to rise above. Now, I'm no longer a fragile, weak woman. I am the strong owner of a coffee shop, someone who has learned how to weather all storms to achieve the success I truly deserve. And so my story ends, not with regret or failure, but with a lesson about the power of believing in oneself and never giving up. Because I proved that even if the whole world may not believe in you, the most important thing is to believe in yourself. And when you do, nothing is impossible.